Hi Stampers, this is Debbie Henderson from Debbie's Designs. Welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to show you a couple new products that will be available in the Sale-A-Bration 2017 catalog. That catalog actually goes live on January 4th and will expire on March 31st. Sale-A-Bration, for those of you that might be new to stamping or new to Stampin' Up!, is offered once a year for 3 months, and it's a way of Stampin' Up! Saying thank you for being our customers. And you are able to pick any product from this catalog for free when you place a $50 order. Today what I'm going to focus on is the So Very Much stamp set. As you can see here, it's a large sentiment and it has a few littler ones that you can add to it. And we're also going to be using Inside the Lines designer paper. I'm going to give you a close-up because it's so pretty, and I'll show you the actual product here in a minute. These are actual black and white designer papers, 12 by 12 inch. There's 12 sheets total, and you get 3 each of the 4 designs. And you can see on this page what they've done with some of it by adding color. Like on this one, they colored the whole thing like you would in a coloring book. In this one, they've added 3 colors with a sponge, the sponging tool right here. So you can pretty much do what you want with these, and you can also leave them in black and white. What I chose to do for today's card was just to highlight some of the images that you see in the designer paper. So what I did is I used Emerald Envy ink with an aqua painter, and I just added color to just the leaves on the paper. So let me show you what that paper looks like. Now, as I've said, it comes in 4 different patterns. This one here is the busiest of the patterns, a full page of flowers and leaves. And what I did for today's card is I actually cut this into 3 strips 4 inches wide. So then you have enough for 6 cards, and I'll show you how to cut that. And once I did that, I had this little piece left over that you can still use as just a little embellishment on a card. The stamp set we're using is also a Sale-A-Bration item. It's called So Very Much, and as you see, what I explained, it had the 4 little stamps that you can coordinate with the larger sentiment. So for today, let me give you a list of supplies. Now, I'm not sure if you noticed or not, but I used the Emerald Envy glitter on my card, and I thought I would mix it up a little bit. Since this glitter, the embossing glitter, comes in 2 colors, I used the Emerald Envy on this card, and I'm going to use the real red on the card that I'm going to show you today, and we're going to make it exactly like this one. So for supplies, we're going to need a scrap of real red, another scrap of real red that measures 2.5 inches wide, and we're going to cut that down. That's for the little sentiment. A real red cardstock base that measures 8.5 by 5.5, and I scored it in the center at 4.5. A scrap piece of Whisper White, and mine measures 4.25 by 5.5, just so I have room to play with on the large sentiment. And then this is my designer paper layer, which measures 4 inches by 5.25 inches. And the way I cut this is I use the middle section when I cut these into 3 strips. And if you'll notice, the images do not go off the page. So once I had my 4-inch wide strip, I cut off just 1/4 inch on the end so that it looks the same on all 4 sides. For ink colors, if you want to do the first card I showed you, you'll need Emerald Envy. But for the card I'm going to create with you today, I'm going to use Real Red, Basic Black, and Versamark ink. You're also going to need a bone folder, the aqua painter, paper snips, the embossing buddy, liquid glue, and your snail adhesive. So let's get started on today's card. Now the first thing I want to show you is a tip that I use whenever I get new rubber stamps like this. I want my image to stamp very clearly, so I use a sanding block and I lightly go over the stamp image. Because all of these images come from the factory and they do have a film on them, this usually helps with making the image stamp a lot better. I'm also going to clean this on my Stampin' scrub, and now I'm ready to stamp. So for the first step, because this is such a large stamp, I'm going to leave it with the rubber facing upwards, and I'm going to ink my stamp with Versamark ink. I find it's a lot easier to ink it facing upwards because it's so large. Okay, we've got that all inked up. I'm going to bring in my Whisper White layer and use my Stamping Emboss Buddy. This will remove any static or greasy fingerprints. And now I'm going to stamp this right in the center. And we're going to cut this down so it doesn't matter how straight it is. And now I'm going to bring in the Real Red Embossing Glitter. And you will need your heat tool also for this. Okay, isn't that pretty? I don't know if you can see the shine, it's so pretty. So now I'm going to bring in my heat tool to melt the embossing powder. It's going to get a little noisy, so I'll try to speed up the video so you won't have to listen to it. Now I'm going to bring in the paper cutter and cut this down to as close as you can see here. I went as close to the lettering as I could to make this as small as possible because of course I didn't want to cover all of my designer paper. So I did go a little close to this one here, but it still shows up nicely. Now I had tried a different way to do this the first time and I didn't like it as well. What I had done is embossed one of these on Whisper White and hand cut around it. But I didn't feel that it stood out as much as the way I did it on the card. So you could actually do it both ways. So the way I'm going to cut this is I'm going to try to gauge myself by making this my straight line. Move this over. And as you can see, I'm using the inside of my ruler here to try to make this parallel as much as I can. Okay, and that looks pretty straight. And now I'm going to use that edge of my cardstock and continue around and go as close as I can to the lettering. Side number 3 and then side number 4. So now I have a perfectly square or rectangular shape for my sentiment. So now let's work on coloring our designer paper. Now on this one, because I was using the Emerald Envy, I focused on the leaves because leaves are naturally green. This time I'm going to focus on the flowers because we're going to be using Real Red. And to do this, all you need to do is squeeze the center of your ink pad if you've never done this before. And then you open up your ink pad, leave it open this way, and now you have an inkwell to do some coloring with. I'm just going to press my aqua painter just a little bit to add some water. And then I'm going to color all of the flowers that I see. And because I want this to look like it's watercolored, you really don't have to be perfect on this. And because you're covering most of the middle with your second layer, don't worry about coloring the middle of your designer paper. So you can see this is quite easy. And if you wanted to, you could use more than one color, but I had decided I wanted to stick to the monochromatic color palette. Okay, I'm not going to make you watch me color all of this. You get the gist of what I'm doing. So I'm going to pause the video and I'll come back when I'm completely finished with the coloring. Okay, I'm back. I have all of my red flowers colored. So now let's assemble the card. So I'm going to use my bone folder to flatten out my card base. And we're going to glue the designer paper layer. And now, because I cut this down, I really can't give you the size that yours should be because everybody's going to be different depending on how close you go to the edge of your sentiment. So what I did is I used a scrap piece of real red. I'm going to flip this over and add stamping dimensionals. This was my first time I did the sentiment on the reverse side, and I forgot to use the stamping emboss buddy, so I didn't dare use that. So that's why you can see that I have the thank you stamped on this side also. Like I always tell my customers, there's two sides to every piece of cardstock, so if you mess up, you should always flip it over and not waste. And now I'm going to glue this so that it's about 1/4 inch on these two sides. And then we're going to bring in the paper cutter and trim that down. And I am just eyeballing this. If some of you guys are not good at eyeballing, just add a little tick mark maybe where you want to cut. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to add snail adhesive and glue that in the center of my card front. And as you can see, there's plenty of designer paper there still showing. It looks so pretty. Now the last step is to bring in the small piece of real red with basic black ink. Now I am very anal about everything that I do and make sure that everything matches. I did basic black on my sentiment because you have basic black on the designer paper, so that coordinates together. I'm going to bring in the sentiment I want to use. And this one says, so thank you so very much. I'm going to bring in the paper cutter one last time. And again, I'm just going to eyeball this. And I'm going to snip the left side square, and then on this side I'm going to flag it. And then we're going to add snail, or you could use the liquid glue. I gave you both options there when I gave you what we needed for supplies. And I'm going to glue this right here so that there's about 1/4 inch of white, and so that the flag sticks out a little bit. So we now have two cards, both using the embossing glitter, two different colors, and they both look beautiful with the coloring of the designer paper. I hope you like my project for today, and don't forget that Sale-A-Bration does start on January 4th. I'm trying to take out these notes here. And for those of you that are my customers, you should have received your catalogs by now, the Sale-A-Bration and the Occasions 2017. If you have any questions, make sure you message me either on YouTube, through email, or on my Facebook page. And I hope to see an order by you in my online store for Sale-A-Bration. Thanks for stopping by.